Assalamu alaikum everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah rabbil Aalameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashraf al-anbiya wal mursaleen. Khatim al-nabiyyin bil qasim Muhammad. Wa ala ahli baytihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin al-ma'sumin al-madlumin. Alladhi azhaba Allahu ankum ar-rijsa ahli al-bayti wa yutahhirakum tathira. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajum. Um, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to our session number 15 today. I was inspired to continue with our discussion on Alhamdulillah rabbil Alameen. Last session was about alchemy and looking at the progression of the soul. And I wanted to show you, I realized that my screen is very tiny, but if you could go on my camera screen where you can see my face. I wanted to show you this progression of, I forgot to put this image on the, what do you call, if I can find it even now. Basically, we were talking about alchemy and we were talking about the progression of the soul. And we discussed how the outer world is representative of the inner world. And so if you see this image over here, these are different symbols for different planets. And starting from from Mercury and the sun, our mystics, they talk about how going closer to our source is the ultimate journey. And in a lot of ways, the sun is representative of the source and the moon is representative of the heart, and how the heart receives this light from the source and then reflects it. That's why we say that we have to shine the mirror of our heart so it can manifest the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more and more clearly and beautifully. And that discussion of going closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is related to Aalameen, because we are constantly understanding that we have to traverse worlds, we have to undo the layers, and we have to let go of the veils so that we can move forward step by step from one world to another world. Now, what I was inspired to share today is that it's not like we are entering a new world every time, but that the world itself changes its meaning every time we change from within. So the journey is more about us experiencing new ways of interacting, new ways of seeing the world. It's like every time a veil is removed, the lens of the human heart changes. So one can say that if there are 7 veils, then imagine there are 7 uh, glasses, like lenses. And every time you look at a lens, the most outermost lens is the dirtiest, it's the most unclean. So you keep cleaning out the lenses and you keep going forward, and as the dirt gets removed, the reality becomes more and more clear. The haqq becomes more and more evident. Our perceptions change, and as we do that, we get closer and closer to light, because the dust and the dirt is preventing that light from reaching us. So this is the discussion of Rabbil Alameen, the Rabb who is taking us from Zarra to the Kamal, from the seed to the tree. And what I wanted to discuss today was the idea of anxiety. In Surah Ma'arij, ayah number 19, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Innal insana khuliqa halu'an. And halu'an is taken as anxiety, as fear. Indeed, mankind was created anxious. Now, when we look into this idea of anxiety, we understand that all of us, a lot of the times, are experiencing a state of anxiety, a state of fear, and it looks differently for everybody. Um, and I have a notification here which I can't find, but anyhow, so we are always experiencing some sort of anxiety, some sort of fear. And a lot of this has to do with the state of the heart. And in the Quran, I just want to read these ayat because they were so pertinent to my discussion today. So I'm just going to read a few of these. The translation: Indeed, mankind was created anxious. When evil touches him, impatient, as in he's impatient. And when good touches him, he's withholding of it, except the observers of prayer, those who are constant in their prayer. Now, the discussion is now, if you can look at it, is starting from this idea of anxiety, but the by the fifth ayat, we already have the solution. We already know where we have to go. We already know what we need to do. So that is going to be the topic of our discussion today. And I want to invite you all to right now take a moment and go into a moment of your anxiety, go into a moment of your fears, and try to enumerate in your mind certain moments which were your moments of restlessness, of feeling lost, and thus feeling a sense of fear. Now, our discussion today is about haluan, this anxiety. There's a beautiful TED talk on YouTube. It's called "We Are Negative by Default." And in that talk, this lady, she's given statistics to prove that a human being by nature stays negative. And the journey, so for her, according to her, we have to be in a constant state of work. We have to be in a constant state of alertness to realize that yes, I am in a state of anxiety, but now I have to consciously get out of it. And so therefore we understand that to be able to get out of negativity, we need positivity. We need the strength to stay positive. We need the strength to stay alert. We need to need the strength to not only stay mindful and alert to be positive, but also to know how to be positive and where to source this positivity from. And that's why today's discussion is going to be about understanding what faith is and how to dissect these different worlds and what role faith plays and where does it come from. So Sayyid Hussain Nasr, in his book The Garden of Truth, he talks about love. And he talks about the ishq hakiki and ishq mizaji, as in the love which is true haq, truth, real love. And then he talks about ishq mijazi, which is the metaphorical love. The reason I'm discussing love here is because, as you can see on the screen, they've written that inner love is what strengthens us, right? Inner love that gives us strength. And inner love gives us the strength to be positive, to stay alert, to be mindful, and then to practice positivity. So what is this love? In Surah number 5, ayah 54, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whom He loves and they love Him. The point to ponder over here is the first and the second part of the sentence, the sequence of it. First, Allah is saying, whom He loves. And then He's saying, and they love Him. So there is first Him loving us. There's first His love that embraces us or surrounds us. And then we are able to love Him. And then we are able to go towards Him. So first there has to be this realization of His love within our hearts. Now, what has happened is usually we are told to love Allah and be obedient to Him. And then we will get His favors. And then things will fall into place. But the idea of a cup, we have been talking about how we need to fill our cups, because what we fill in the cup is what will overflow, right? Is what is going to come out of it, what we're going to be able to give because of what we have. And that is why it's important to understand that the first step is to feel his love in our hearts, to feel his presence, to feel him embracing us and not feeling alone or abandoned. So, in the chart of energies that we did with Dr. Hawkins, the cone, we saw that there were these emotions of shame and guilt. And those are the lowest forms of energy and the feelings and emotions that we can vibrate at. And shame and guilt will eventually give rise to fear. And so fear becomes the lowest energy, while faith becomes the opposite of fear. And faith becomes the destination. We want to go to a life where we do life from a place of faith and not fear. So we are analyzing love, and love that gives us faith, and love and faith that are within our hearts first before we can give it to others and do life from it. We want to change the lens of our life from a lens of fear and survival to a lens of faith. And as we move through layers of fear into a place of faith, that is where we start to do our journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We start to break through the veils. We start to go through those 7 chakras, those 7 nufus that we said, nafs mulhama and nafs amara. So this is the journey from fear to faith. Now, on the screen, it says all forms of love that appear to be outside and independent of the bond of love between God and human beings is what Ishq Majazi is. And as we know that our journey is that journey of Tawheed, Ishq Majazi becomes all the love that we see around us, for the things around us, for the people around us. And he also enumerates certain loves in his book, the Garden of Truth. He says there is the love of the self and ego, then there is love of others, there's love of sacred realities as we move forward, then there's the love of the sacred realities like messengers, saints, and sacred art, which bring to us the awareness of the source. And then there is the love of God. So we see how the love of the self and ego manifests itself in certain characteristics in people. And then we start to love others and how that shows up. So if we say love of the self and ego, it shows up as narcissism, it shows up as self-centeredness, which is very different from self-love, of not love of the self, but the other way. We have discussed self-care, right, in a different light. We're not talking about the selfish love. When we say self-love, we are talking about the love of the ego over here. I'm sorry, the two concepts get confused, but right now let's focus on the love of the ego, which causes narcissism and self-centeredness. And when there is love of others is what we are actually going to be discussing today, the love of others, right? So moving forward, we understand that our journey is about finding light, finding love, finding Allah's presence, and to be able to find Allah in our hearts, we have to polish our hearts, right? Remove that dirt. And we said that as the heart shines brighter and brighter, it starts to manifest Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through that mirror. Now, what is that mirror? What is this process? It's a process of becoming. It's a process of becoming from nothing to something in God. And it's a journey from a seed to a tree that now manifests Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Allah says, I was a hidden treasure and I wanted to be known. And through us, through our manifestation, through who we become, is through us that the light of Allah shines. And therefore, what is the connection of love of others to the seed and the tree is that to be able to become that manifestation that we were meant to become, we need to find a lot of courage to be our true selves. And for that, we have to get in touch with the source of love. Why? because love gives us the power to face challenges, to face the hate that we may face in this journey of becoming ourselves, to face doubts, and to face the naysayers. Now, isn't it interesting that the veils that prevent us from reaching our true selves within us then become the outer judgments of people, outer point of views, the system of the world, conditioning that we have been receiving, um, cultural dogmas, cultural rituals, culture itself, and the family and the people and the friends that surround us, the circle that we move around in. Therefore, it is really important to understand our own selves, our own inner worlds, because in my own experience, in order for me to truly start to make a connection with my true self, I realized that constantly there was a need for validation. And it's a very natural need for validation because as a child, whenever we do something, we want validation. We want someone to clap for us, and it makes us feel good about what we're doing, and then we want to do more of it. So we kind of get caught up in this need for validation. So in the Quran, Allah is saying that you will find that you can get rid of this anxiety, haluan. You can get rid of this haluan, this anxiety, if you are constantly in prayer, constantly in salah, right? And salah is a conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is a conversation where we have been discussing that this conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala needs to be like a conversation with a therapist. And in front of the therapist, you can be truly yourself. So you can see that now the journey out of this love of others, because that's a stage, the love of others forces us to feel validated when they validate us, because we are in love with the people and their point of views and their cultures, and because we are seeking their love constantly, we want to fit in, we want to be like them. And in this sleepiness, in this heedlessness of loving others, of wanting validation from others, of uh, fitting in and being like them, we move out further and further away from who we are ourselves. Because Allah has only made one of each one of us, we will never truly find peace and joy in becoming like somebody else. We can take inspiration from others, but the journey will be ours, and it will be unique, and it will be different, and it will entail ideas and thoughts which at times we will not be able to find validation from other people. And so many times when we express ourselves in school, in colleges, in gatherings, first we try to give this disclaimer: I may sound weird, this may be a very weird idea, I may sound like a psycho, but I need to say this, right? Because there is an apologetic attitude towards being ourselves, because we feel like we will be shunned, that we will be thrown out of this communion. And therefore, this need to fit in can take away from us so much of who we are. What shame and guilt does is that when we try to be ourselves, the people on outside can make us feel shameful and they can make us feel guilty. Now, there's a difference between shame and guilt. Shame is saying that I am a bad person intrinsically, and something about me is not right, me as a person, who I am. And therefore, no matter what I do, I will not be able to come up to the standard of people because I constantly feel that me as a person is faulty, it's defected, something about me is broken, something about me as a person cannot be fixed. It's just bad. I'm a bad person. So I am not good enough. I'm not good enough for people. I'm not good enough for God. I'm just not good enough. But guilt, on the other hand, is this beep, this light, this alarm sound within us when we go away from doing the right thing. The interesting thing about guilt is that we learn to feel guilty because of the dogma that we're taught initially. And that dogma of right and wrong will then make us feel guilty. But eventually, if we follow our hearts and we get on this journey of the wayfarer towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then guilt will beep every single time we are not being authentic. So there's a big difference between shame and guilt here. And while shame will put us into our dark corners and prevent us from being our own light and shining our own light and being ourselves, and shame will take away this hope from us that we can ever be good enough, because these things, this shame usually resides in a state of unawakened state of heedlessness. And I'm going to come to how we can work on that as well. So while shame prevents us from showing our light, guilt can become the source of being our true selves and being that light that we want to shine. And therefore, guilt becomes this inner voice within us saying, wait a minute, why are you dressing up like this because you want to fit in when you're not even feeling comfortable in your own skin, right? Change, go, change, be yourself. Or why are you praising someone because you want a favor out of them? Allah is the giver of favors. You don't need to be nice to someone just because you want a favor in return. And we are doing this at such subtle levels at times, we don't even realize that we're doing it because it's become a part of our habits. And what we want to do now is enter the state of the musallin, the people who are not just praying. If you can see this ayat, it's so beautiful. Allah is saying, illal musallin, except the observers of prayer. Then Allah says, do alladhina hum ala salatihim daimun. Daimun as in daimi taur pe, constantly in every state, in constantly they're in a state of salah. So we want to enter that state of musallin where we become so vigilant of our inner worlds that then we start to understand what this voice is saying. What am I doing? Am I doing things in a sleepy mode, that I'm sleepwalking and I'm just doing everything, or I'm doing it consciously? So when we come to rely on an inner power that doesn't diminish by what people say, then we find an inner certainty and clarity. Now, what do I mean by that? This love that we were talking about, the source of love within us, which can help us face all kinds of challenges, hate, doubt, and people who are putting us down for being ourselves. This love that holds us when we are alone, this love that understands us in all of our peculiarities and our eccentricities, is going to be the love that is going to make us feel whole and complete no matter what other people say. We realize that I am not broken, incomplete, or lacking in any way because I have the light of God within me. And every breath that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding me that He's loving me and holding me and giving me one more moment to live out of His will. And just like Allah is unique, He has desired me to find my unique path. Then what will happen is that we will not feel our lights diminishing just because of what other people are saying, or if other people are not validating us. So what we understand is that to be in a state of contemplation all the time then means to be in a constant state of communication and connection and to be in Allah's embrace all the time. So we can make this distinction between me being incomplete and feeling shame and this voice of guilt. So a clarity develops within the heart, and a clarity comes about in the voice of the heart. And we need that clarity in the voice of the heart because we want to follow our heart, because our heart is going to lead the way. Now, a lot of times in my own journey, I want to share something over here about my own journey of love. That I come from a background of very strong right and wrong teachings. I grew up as a child in the madrasa, and I was very judgmental because that's how I was brought up, and everything was about black and white, and there was no room for gray. So it was a journey from fear to faith, and a journey from right and wrong to acceptance and love. And therefore, it resonates with me when Sayyid Hussain Nasr talks about this hakiki love. And in my journey, one of the teachers I was sitting with and having a discussion, and I asked her and I said, how do I move forward in my journey? And she said, do you feel loved? And I said, I don't. I was very clear about it. I don't. And she said, how come don't you feel loved? And I said that what I feel is that I'm just not worthy. I'm just not good enough for God. I'm just not good enough for anyone in general, but I always felt that for me to be loved, I have to do something. For me to receive grace, I have to give something constantly. And that made me it's a new thing that I'm realizing that I was doing, a neki-holic, you know? Like you need to be constantly in a state of doing a neki, a good deed, to deserve God's love, attention, to deserve good things in life, to move forward in life with a sense of worthiness. You had to show your worthiness constantly. And that can make us go into a state of disbalance because our intentions go out of alignment, right? I'm just going to check the chat for a second. So literally I was that, and I had this realization not too long ago that the reason I was indulging in doing too many good deeds was because I wanted to feel loved. And there was a part of me that was empty, and there was a part of me that was thirsty. And what will happen if we go about our day without filling ourselves, without eating, without energy to go about? What are we going to give? And therefore, an act which is done without love, I think I was just reading something, and it's somewhere, I'll find it later on. There's a difference in the actions that are done when they're done out of me feeling full. I want to feel loved. I want to feel full. That's why I'm doing something good. Compared to I'm already loved and I'm doing good because I want to give love. So there's a huge shift in the energy of our actions from wanting love to giving love. And the problem is that we all have this source of love within us. It's closed up in a box, and we're not looking that it's there. And we feel that we don't have it, and we go about wanting to collect it from outside. Now, when we start to do that, we're going out as beggars of love. So we can't give it. And when we see that the love is already within me and I'm ready to open that love and to feel that love, then I don't even need to make an effort. It just starts to glow and shine out of us, and everything just aligns itself, and the intention just becomes aligned with a sense of surrender. So this is where I wanted to bring our discussion over here. If you can see my pointers, can you see my pointers? I don't know if it shows on the screen. Yeah. Over here where it says Ishke Hakiki, it says inner surrender or slavery. Now, when we can be touched by this love, when the heart gets touched by this love, when the doors open, when I say to myself, I'm willing to receive love, I'm willing to see this love, I'm willing to accept this love, I am willing to feel worthy, then what happens is that there is a inner experience of such love to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's beauty and wisdom that we automatically surrender to this love. And there are no words that can express this process, or I mean, there are, and people have, of course. But what I'm trying to say is that this is such a experience, an inner experience. It is such an inner experience which one feels in when they're infatuated to another human being, when they are in love with another human being, and they automatically start to do things to please them. They automatically start to emulate them. Whatever color they like, you like, whatever they eat, you eat, things like that. And so that surrender to Allah comes when you get touched by His love, right? So when I was talking to my teacher and I said that I don't feel this love and I don't feel worthy and I don't feel like I deserve good because I'm not good enough. And there were things that I realized that were there from my childhood. So we all need to go back into our childhoods and do some inner child healing, which is a very new concept for me. I didn't even know it even 6 months ago. It's very recent that I learned. But it really does help for us to understand that there are things that we are holding on to from our childhood that make us feel that we're not worthy of love. So with all of that work, and with this conversation, what my teacher asked me to do, she said, then pray to Allah. Pray to Him that He shows you what unconditional love is, right? And I did. And then Allah showed some experiences in my life. I was able to experience this experience of feeling loved, right? And what we need to do is take that first step. We need to have this realization, I do want to feel loved. And then we ask for that love, and then Allah will open a path. And that's when we have to understand, and that is what I want to discuss today, is that because we live in a state of fear and right and wrong constantly, a lot of times experiences are coming our way, but we don't let them affect us. We are in a state of fear, so we close up. So what is this closing up? It's this ayat over here where Allah is saying, when evil touches them, they're impatient. But when good touches them, they're withholding of it. Now, there are two meanings of this withholding, right? When khair is coming, which is the experience, which is the journey of love. So if you look at these ayat, these are the 5 journeys. These are the 5 stages of the soul. We're anxious, then evil touches us, we're impatient. And shar is actually not shar, right? We've discussed this, that evil is not anything other than Allah. Allah sends it. To us, shar can be something which is like a calamity. It can be a difficulty in life. And we say, this is something bad that is happening. So we'll call a calamity bad, right? But in Allah's world, there is no evil. So when this kind of calamity or evil or something that is painful for us touches us, we become impatient, right? And this impatience is then the opener of the heart, because I read somewhere yesterday, I think it said, a broken heart is an open heart, right? So evil is not a reality in itself, but it is our perception that makes it evil. And when we are faced with a calamity or difficulty, we become impatient. And then afterwards, what happens is that good comes. After that breaking open of the heart, good comes, but we're withholding. Now, what does it withholding mean? A lot of people will generally translate it as saying that you get good, but you don't share it, you know? And it becomes a very, you see, it becomes a very judgmental kind of conversation in the Quran where Allah is saying, oh, mankind was created anxious, and look at him, he's he's so impatient, and then when good comes, he's so withholding. It's like this tone that we've been taught in the Quran. It's not like that. If we look at it from another perspective, we are withholding. We don't allow good to touch us. We are withholding. We hold ourselves back. And we don't let khair enter. We're getting love, but we're so reserved. We have so many barriers that we don't allow this love to touch us, you know? And it can come from so many different sources and we don't realize it, that everything is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and everything is coming from Him in His will, in His divine plan. And so when we understand that this evil or difficulty in life has come to break open my heart, which will be followed by something beautiful, I have to surrender. I have to surrender myself to receiving it. When we allow ourselves to receive this love, we understand that there are only intermediaries that come as means of giving a message to us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether they're people, situations, opportunities, they're all messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Constantly we're saying, Sanurihim ayatina fil afaqi wa fi anfusihim. These are signs, these are ayat, these are signposts, these are things which are coming from Allah talking to us, right? If we can imagine a meteor shower, they're flying from the sky in the form of these people, situations, and they are coming from us, from Allah, with glass bottles with little messages inside it. It's our job now to open that bottle and start to read those messages. What are these messages saying to us? When that happens, when we surrender, then we enter a state of constant prayer. What I realized is that when we surrender ourselves to these situations, what starts to happen is that in a state of evil, when it is touching us, which can be a calamity or difficulty, the heart enters this state of pain where it's so unbearable that there is no other way but to be in a constant state of conversation with Allah. And when we're touched by some khair, it confuses us. We become so bewildered by the things that happen in our life that again it puts us into a place of constantly conversing with Allah and saying, Allah, I don't understand. I'm confused. Allah, what is this? Okay, I want to surrender. Can you help me surrender? Oh Allah, I'm unable to surrender. Please take my heart. Make me surrender. So then what happens is that there's a constant state of prayer. There's a constant state of conversation with Allah, and then there's a constant state of Allah showing Himself to us in His miracles. And that is what I want to talk about today. That when Allah is saying in Surah Fath, هو الذي أنزل السكينة في قلوب المؤمنين ليزدادوا إيمانا مع إيمانهم, then there is a constant state of us putting our faith in Him, and then Him reinforcing that faith by showing us something. He will show us something, and we need to have that vigilance to keep our eyes open to catch His miracles. Okay? And this then happens as we go beyond these veils and we start to go into other realms. And actually, that is what I wanted to discuss today, inshallah, we have time. So now detachment from the world is not just detaching and saying, I don't want things, I don't want hi-fi life, and I don't want a nice car and things like that. Again and again, we have to remind ourselves detachment is not, uh, owning things, but, it's not about not wanting to own things. That's okay, you can own things, but it's just about not being owned by them. That is detachment, right? Don't be owned by the things that we want. Don't be owned by them. But on a higher understanding, detachment is the detachment from the need of validation from other people. Okay? A lot of times we will want things because we want validation as a rich person, as a resourceful person, as a successful person, because these are the labels that define us and make us worthy of being loved. So as we will sit in our musalla and contemplate and be in a state of this conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we will find time in the day to sit silently and observe the workings of our inner reality, what starts to happen is that a clarity happens where we can now not only distinguish between guilt and shame. We can start to distinguish between this voice in our hearts, which is sometimes telling us to be authentic, but sometimes it is saying, I want this and I want that. Then when we detach, when we start to detach, then this need of validation starts to go, and then we arrive at a place where we say, what is it that my soul really wants, right? As a very simple example, I want to share something from my sister's life, because we're twin sisters. And as twins, our parents used to dress up the same. So we had kind of lost touch with our identity as who we are. And there came a point, and I was the older one. So there came a point in my sister's life where she called me up and she said, you know what I did today? I threw away all my watercolors. And I said, okay, why are you telling me? And she said, I always thought that I love to paint, and I don't like to paint. At that stage in her life, she was explaining to me, I don't like to paint. But because you always like to paint, I thought I like to paint. But today I realized that I don't find it joyful to paint. So you see, there was an opening, there was a light that shone through, there was a voice that was becoming clearer, and there was a self-realization. And there was an understanding that, wait a second, I've been painting because my sister has always painted and received praise for it or whatever, and that has given her an identity as an artist, and maybe I got lost in that. And she realized that she's a brilliant graphic designer, and she doesn't like to paint as much with her hand but with the computer. And so she was able to find herself through this self-reflection. And so, Allah Ta'ala in his book says this beautiful thing, which I really like to read again and again. And I think I don't get enough of it, when he says that fear, okay, he quotes an ayat, a hadith of Imam Sadiq, where it says that the pillars of kufr are four: desire, fear, anger, and rage. Fear in this context has been interpreted as fearing the people for fearing the people for opposing and violating their customs and norms based on sensory intuition. So the fear of being opposed and the fear within ourselves of violating the customs and norms comes as a major obstacle in finding ourselves. And the traveler must abandon and free himself of all conventional social customs, manners, contingent affairs that create obstacles for his journey on the path to God. The Gnostics refer to this attitude as madness, because an insane person is not acquainted with people's customs and habits, nor does he observe or attach any significance to them. He is indifferent to their praise and blame, and has no fear of their hostile reaction against him, nor does he try to mend his ways and manners. So this praise and this blame is the key, because we fear the blame and we fear hostile reactions, right? So now, we understand that we have to find our grounding in this deep inner love of being validated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? I want to quote this saying that I came across yesterday. Being is desirable because it is identical with beauty. Being, I think, over here is referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And beauty is loved because it is being. We ourselves possess beauty when we are true to our own being. Yes, you can see that the being earlier is the capital B and the being later is a small b. So being this is a discussion about the higher reality, God and us, right? And the rub that we're seeking can be only found through this being. The small b being only can find the capital B being. So we ourselves possess beauty when we are true to our own being. Ugliness is in going over to another order. Another order meaning another custom, another way of manners of life and all of that. When we get caught up in another order, we stop finding ourselves. And when we find that disconnection, that is when self-loathing comes in, lack of self-esteem comes in. That is when we start to lose ourselves. And this whole feeling of not feeling good enough, feeling ugly starts to set in, because we have now forgotten about that inner compass and we have gotten lost in what the other people on the outside want from us. Knowing ourselves, we are beautiful. So قَدْ عَرَفَ نَفْسَهُ فَقَدْ عَرَفَ رَبَّهُ. This is what this saying is all about. Knowing ourselves, we are beautiful. We are connected. We find beauty in ourselves. But in self-ignorance, we are ugly, right? So knowing ourselves means then to be able to shine ourselves, to be ourselves. Self-worth is what? That without Allah, I am nothing. With Him, I am everything. And with Him, then there is no fear of validation, there's no fear of blame, there's no fear of praise. And you are okay with the hostility of the world outside. And you find the courage through this love to be able to be yourselves. And I want to read something from a book which I have read before. It was from Carolyn Miss's book, The Anatomy of the Soul, where she's talking about a priest. And this priest was going through his dark night of the soul. And he explains that the dark night of the soul is that when you start to do this self-inquiry, you come across very dark places within yourself, right? You start to realize that I may have cheated people, I may have been unjust, I haven't been authentic to myself, I've been a people pleaser. And a lot of these things start to create anxiety and self-hate. And you don't find yourself worthy of love. And what he says is that in that dark night of self realization, of self discovery, you come to a place where you say, maybe I'm just not worthy of God's love. And that dark time is so painful that you really, really have no cure for it other than to run back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what he says there is that he says that there is really no other way than to hear this voice of God saying, and God says to us that even in this moment, will you find me worthy of being your savior? Do you still feel that in this dark time you can come back to me? You can find your way back to me. And that becomes that ray of hope and light. And I honestly feel that when people start to go on this journey of truth seeking and a lot of our foundations start to break, a lot of things that we built our realities on start to fall down, and the ground beneath our feet starts to shake, we can come to points in life where everything falls apart. There is no understanding of God, there is no understanding of faith, there is no understanding of who we are, where we are. And mystics say that in that moment, even when you don't know who your God is and who you're worshiping, there's an inner surrender, and you go into the sajda and you say, whoever you are who is sustaining me, whoever you are, who is all wise and all loving, I can't make sense of you through the path that I was taught. I cannot make sense of you through what I was taught and conditioned to believe. But whoever you are and wherever you are, just guide me back home, you know. And in that state of surrender, one is able to experience the true reality of that connection that has no name, that has no religion, that has no label. And in its pure essence of love, that love can touch our hearts and make us feel held and guided and supported when all of our scaffolding start to fall. So there's a hadith of Unman Basri in which he says that what is the reality of slavery. And the reason I wanted to discuss this reality of slavery is because um, we talked about slavery that comes through true surrender and love. And the first, Imam Sadiq is actually giving this hadith to Umman Basri about the reality of slavery. And he says there are three things that a slave needs to do. Number one, that he realizes that nothing is his and there is zero ownership. Number two, he does not plan. He's occupied in Allah's plans. And number three, he occupies himself with Allah's commands and surrenders. Now, a lot of people will just say that, okay, so the ownership, we understand that, we let go, we don't control. This is the place where we have to let go and let go of control, because control is all about fear, because we fear that if we don't control, things will fall apart and we won't be able to deal and cope with life if things go out of control. So the first thing is that we let go of control, and when we let go of control, we automatically let go of ownership of wanting people to be a certain way, wanting children to be a certain way, wanting husband to be a certain way, wanting parents to be a certain way, expectations, because when we can't control how they behave, then we can't have expectations also, right? And that becomes a huge means of removing hurt from our life. The second thing is, he does not plan. So we become friends with uncertainty. Uncertainty becomes the biggest constant in our life. Change becomes the biggest constant in our life, and it helps us to surf the waves of the ocean with joy. And waves don't come and tell us when and how and what they're going to be, but you start to surf in the adventure of uncertainty. So, what the first thing does is that this surrender to zero control brings us less hurt automatically. So, hurt becomes a side product, right? Like no hurt, and living in a state of no hurt becomes a side product of letting go of control and fear. When we relent to Allah's plans and become friendly with uncertainty, then we automatically find a life which is full of adventure. And that becomes a side product. And the third thing is that the slave of God occupies himself with Allah's commands. Now, to the rational mind that is stuck in the Sharia of the black and white, Sharia is constantly in play, of course, but the I'm talking about the first stage of fear. When people are caught up in that state of black and white, for them the commands of God become the Sharia rulings. And the danger with Sharia rulings is that that is another discussion, and I need to do it. But there's a danger to getting caught up with the present moment Sharia law by legislation. Number one, because it is in the hands of people who are themselves imperfect, so their perceptions can be imperfect, number one. Number two, Sharia has to evolve logistically, geographically, and time-wise. Culturally, it has to evolve as in the historical context. It has to constantly progress and change. So the 3% of the Quran, which is Sharia, is in constant flux. Number three, which is my understanding, is that when God has not created a single human being alike another, then laws need to have a lot of flexibility, and laws need to have that cushion in them to support and facilitate every person's individual journey to God and not stifle and strangle them to the extent where they're not able to come in a direct communication with their Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with their Rabb. And a lot of times, very stringent and very rigid laws of Sharia made by human beings can get in the way of our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It prevents our evolution. It can so it should not overpower the inner journey. The surrender then has to be a mix, a combination of the outer knowledge given to us by the sages. So I'm not denying that, you know, the ayatollahs and the scholars who are giving us rulings have to be dismissed. Not at all. They have to be part and parcel of our life, because we cannot do the kind of work they've done. But we cannot shut our brains and shut our own journey and let go of who we are and our individual unique passions and unique understandings and unique intuitive voice within our hearts. It has to be a combination of sensibly using their knowledge, but being true to the voice in our hearts, and then taking them together, because that is the journey of the Salik, the traveler, the wayfarer, which is what? Sharia, Tariqa, Hakika. So Sharia has to work with the Tariqa, which is the Ikhlaq, but it also has to work with the Hakika, which is my truth, which is my Hakika within my heart. And if I ignore my truth, then I can't find my God, right? So these are the three realities of a slave. Now, when we are talking about my reality and my hakika, then this is where Allama Tabatabai's voice comes into my head again and again, where he's saying that you have to let go of the customs, you have to let go of the mannerisms, you have to let go of the conditionings of the society, and really go into this deep digging, this deep extrapolation, this deep excavation of the truth that is in our hearts. And so many times it will be so difficult to follow the voice in our hearts because of the blame and the praise outside. And therefore, it becomes a journey of staying in a constant state of true love within our hearts, of staying grounded in feeling accepted and loved and embraced as we are, because the journey is all about being who we are. And so the journey of authenticity becomes a journey of manifesting who I am inside, and then it starts to show outside in my actions, so that the inner and the outer become aligned. So from duality it becomes oneness, right? From a fractured personality it becomes a whole personality. From being something inside and living something on the inside, it becomes a life of oneness and tawheed, where there is only one life. Now, I wanted to actually discuss Deepak Chopra's different levels of reality, and how as we traverse through these stages of starting with fear, it all starts with fear. If you see stage 1, fear, right? Stage 1, horizon of fear. So he has really beautifully shown and identified these different stages in so many different dimensions and so many different perspectives. And in that, he has spoken of fear as the first one. So that is why my talk today about Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen was that in order for the Rabb to take us from the seed to the tree we want to become, for the Rabb to take what is hidden and make it manifest, we start with the journey of fear. And as we recognize the different kinds of fears in our lives, we can start to go on this journey of Alameen within us. And then next time, inshallah, I will discuss these different Alameen, you know, horizons of fear and all of that, and how it will change the way we perceive the outer Alameen. So the journey becomes about understanding the inner Alameen and traveling through the inner Alameen. And as we will travel through the inner Alameen, the lens through which we see the outer Alameen will change. And therefore, as the inner worlds change, the outer worlds will start to change as well. Alhamdulillah rabbil Alameen. This is where I would like to end the session today. Our time is up, exactly 1 hour, even though I was supposed to do only what do we call we were supposed to do only 45 minutes. So now I would like to stop the recording and